For over a century, three forces have silently shaped the world: oil, debt, and the dollar. Together, they form a triangle so powerful that every nation, every market, and every person on Earth lives inside its invisible geometry. This is the story of how black gold became the bloodstream of global power, how paper promises replaced real value, and how one currency came to rule them all until, perhaps, the day it doesn't. It began in the early 20th century, when oil wasn't just fuel, it was the new fire. Nations that controlled it could move armies, factories, and economies. Britain's empire once ran on coal, America's ran on oil. And with every barrel, the U.S. realized that whoever controls the flow of energy controls the future. When World War II ended, the world was broken, desperate for reconstruction. The United States held 2/3 of the world's gold and the largest oil reserves. The dollar, backed by gold and oil, became not just a currency, but the ticket to rebuild civilization. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, global leaders agreed.
Oil,
the U,
debt, and
S.
dollar
would be as good as gold.
Self-feeding loop no one
Other
can
currencies
escape.
would peg to it. But gold was
When
finite.
oil rises,
The world's
dollar
ambition
shakes.
was not.
When the
As
dollar
nations
falls,
borrowed,
debt
spent,
grows.
and expanded, America printed more dollars to
Nations
keep the
bled for
machine
energy,
alive.
but the
By the
currency always survived.
1,960 seconds, there were far more dollars overseas than gold in
Because faith,
U.S.
not gold,
vaults.
holds
Foreign
the system
countries
together
began
now.
asking for their gold back. In
Every
1971,
headline hides the
President
same
Richard
triangle:
Nixon made a
oil,
decision
debt,
that would
and
change
dollars.
history. He closed the gold window. From that moment,
Economists call
the
it
dollar was
stability.
backed by nothing but faith,
History calls
trust,
it
and power.
illusion.
Yet, something curious happened. The dollar didn't
In
collapse.
deserts of oil,
In fact, it grew
Power
stronger.
found its reflection.
How? Because the U.S.
And in the
found
West,
a new anchor
printing
oil.
replaced
In
producing.
1974, Washington struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. The kingdom would sell
Until
its
the
oil
world
exclusively
spun too
in
fast
U.S.
way
dollars,
for
and in
everyone.
return, America would provide military protection. Other OPEC nations soon followed.
triangle is
The petrodollar was born. From that moment, any country that needed oil, which meant
In
every country
1974,
also
a deal
needed
was struck in land, not in
U.S.
gold,
dollars.
but in oil.
Demand for dollars became
The
infinite.
U.S. promised
And
protection.
with it, America's
Saudi
ability
Arabia
to borrow
promised to
without
sell
limit.
oil.
This was genius.
Only in dollars.
America could now print money
The
to
world
buy
began to
oil,
pump, not
while
just
the rest of the
oil,
world had
but
to earn
demand for
dollars
the
to
US
survive.
dollar itself.
The global financial triangle was complete. Oil
Nations
flowed
stored
out,
dollars
dollars
as if they
flowed
were
in,
treasures of gold.
and debt filled the gap in between. Central banks around the world stored
Each printed dollar
U,
came back as
S,
oil, interest,
bonds,
and power.
like treasure. The U.S. consumed,
The
others
petrodollar
produced,
gave America
and
wings,
Wall Street thrived
but they
in the
were
middle,
soaked in
recycling dollars back into global markets. But every
A
triangle
cycle began
casts a shadow.
at Lani.
When debt replaces
for
productivity
dollars,
and money
dollars
replaces
for
value,
dominance.
cracks begin to form. The
From oil
1,980
profits
seconds
grew the
brought
empire
financial
of
deregulation
finance.
and credit explosions. The
Some question,
1,990
should one
seconds
nation's currency
turned
rule
speculation
them all?
into religion. By the 2000s,
But by then,
the
the addiction was
U.S.
too deep to
was not
quit.
just the world's consumer, it was the world's borrower. Wars in the Middle East were
Every
fought with
student of
debt,
economics would learn
financed
the
by the
same
same
gospel.
oil states
Oil
America
runs on
protected.
dollars.
Every crisis, from dot-com to housing
Crises
to pandemic,
came and went,
was met with
but
the
the
same
dollar
response:
always survived.
print more. The more the Fed printed, the higher asset prices
Because
climbed.
every drop of
The
oil
rich
carried
got richer.
invisible debt.
The rest paid
owed
the
to the
price through
same
inflation,
master.
rent, and
Every
stagnating
nation stored
wages.
their future
Oil and
inside
debt
the dollar
became a
barrel.
feedback loop. When oil prices rose, inflation followed.
It was the
To fight
perfect
inflation,
triangle.
central
Oil,
banks raised
debt,
rates,
and dollars,
slowing growth
bound by
and
trust
creating more
and
debt.
fear.
When oil prices fell, markets panicked, and governments printed even more to stabilize the system. The dollar's dominance meant that global crises often began and ended in Washington. If the U.S. sneezed, the world caught pneumonia. Meanwhile, new players began questioning the system. China built factories, sold goods for dollars, and used those dollars to buy U.S. debt, funding the very consumer that bought its products. Russia, an energy giant, watched how the dollar dictated global power and sought escape routes. Nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America noticed the pattern. Their resources flowed out, their debts grew, and yet prosperity always seemed to flow back to New York and London. In simple terms, the global triangle looked like this: oil as the resource, the dollar as the medium, and debt as the engine. It worked beautifully until trust began to erode, because faith, not gold, now backed everything. And faith is fragile. The 2008 financial crisis shattered illusions of infinite stability. America bailed out banks, printed trillions, and promised reform. But instead, it doubled down. Quantitative easing became the new normal. Printing money no longer meant physical bills, it meant digital debt. Numbers appearing out of thin air, inflating the value of assets, and devaluing the meaning of work. Then came 2020. The pandemic froze economies, and governments unleashed a tsunami of money. Oil prices briefly went negative, a symbolic collapse of the real economy. But the stock market soared. How? Because liquidity, not productivity, now defined success. Debt no longer felt like danger. It felt like oxygen. But the air was getting thinner. Inflation roared back in 2022. Energy prices spiked. For the first time in decades, the dollar's magic began to fade at the edges. Behind closed doors, countries started building alternatives. The BRICS nations discussed a shared currency for trade. China began buying oil from Saudi Arabia, not in dollars, but in yuan. Russia sold energy for rubles. Central banks around the world bought record amounts of gold. Slowly, quietly, the triangle began to wobble. But here's the paradox. Even as nations try to escape the dollar's web, they still rely on it. When crises hit, everyone runs to dollars, not away from them. The system is flawed, but it's the only one that exists. Today, global debt stands at over $300 trillion, more than 3 times the size of the world economy. The U.S. debt alone exceeds $35 trillion. And yet, the demand for dollars continues. Because as long as oil and trade are priced in dollars, the world has no choice but to play the game. This is the secret power of the triangle. It traps everyone, including the one who built it. But triangles, like empires, don't last forever. As renewable energy rises, oil's dominance may fade. As digital currencies grow, debt might take new forms. And as global trust fractures, the dollar may one day face a rival strong enough to challenge it. If that day comes, the world will discover what the triangle was really made of. Not gold, not oil, but belief. Belief that a green piece of paper has value. Belief that tomorrow's debt can pay for today's comfort. Belief that the system will always rebalance itself. But belief, once shaken, can collapse faster than any market crash. The real question isn't whether the dollar will fall, it's whether the world is ready for what replaces it. Oil, debt, and dollars built the modern age, the highways, the wars, the skyscrapers, and the smartphones. But they also built a paradox: infinite consumption on a finite planet. The triangle gave us growth, but it also gave us greed. It gave us prosperity, but it borrowed it from the future. And now, that future is arriving, invoice in hand. So the next time you fill your car, swipe your card, or check your investments, remember, you're not just participating in an economy. You're standing inside a $1 trillion illusion held together by oil, debt, and dollars. The global triangle you were never supposed to notice.